Shona Clive, project lead for the Rail Cluster Builder project. For those of you who might not know me, I'm working with the team here at Scottish Engineering. I'm in Glasgow today, so it's really nice to be out of my house and up in the big city. I'm also Chair of Women in Rail Scotland. My previous role was Head of Marketing and Communications at Babcock's Rail Business, and I've worked in the rail sector for about 25 years now. I'm really delighted to give a very warm welcome to our fantastic panel of speakers today, and would really like to extend a big thank you to them all for making time to support our event today. Thanks so much. Alex Hynes, Managing Director of Scotland's Railway, is our headline speaker and will talk to us about Scotland's railway, key opportunities on the horizon and what Scotland will need from the supply chain. Raj Sinha, Managing Director, SWGR, will tell us about the success journey that SWGR has been on with a safe, competent workforce key in supporting that journey. Andy Willett, Sales Manager, and Luke Adams, Business Development Manager from CTM, will give us an overview of their online competence and training solution, and a short live demonstration will be delivered near the end of the event today. We'll also hold a question and answer session with the speakers, so please do post any questions you have on the chat facility at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll capture them at the end. As with most of our events, we're recording this one, just like the others, and a link will be sent out to you after today. You'll find the previous recordings of events that we've run on the Rail Cluster webpage on Scottish Engineering's website, which I'd encourage you to have a wee look at if you haven't already. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Rail Cluster project if you don't know about it, particularly for those that don't know. Sorry if you've heard it before, I'll keep it short as I can. So the Rail Cluster project is an 18-month project that commenced in August last year. It's jointly funded by Scottish Enterprise and the European Regional Development Fund. We're also supported by Transport Scotland. We have several aims, but in a nutshell, our key purpose is to connect SMEs in the engineering and manufacturing sectors in Scotland looking to diversify into rail to grow their presence in the sector. And what we do is facilitate the necessary links with the Scottish rail market. So with organisations like Network Rail, ScotRail, Tier 1s, rolling stock manufacturers and the wider supply chain. Our other key aim is to raise awareness of the opportunities across the Scottish rail sector and beyond. The context of the project is the Rail Decarbonisation Action Plan, issued in July last year, in which the aim is to deliver carbon neutral rail transport by 2035 and make Scotland a leader in creating a net zero emission passenger railway. Just a little bit about the Rail Cluster. We're now approximately halfway through the project. We started in August. And to give an indication of the level of interest in it, here are some of the numbers that are quite worthy of note. So we've got 550 individuals registered with the cluster project from 361 organisations. Out of these 361 organisations, we have 195 SMEs from a huge variety of different sectors across Scotland, such as marine, oil and gas, renewables, aerospace, automotive, etc. We've had 16 SMEs register with us last month, so there's still interest, it's still growing, so that's good news. The rail sector presents multi-sector diversification potential for SMEs, especially where there might be synergies or the opportunity to adapt their services and products to make them work in the rail sector. So we have fabricators, precision engineers, instrumentation and control businesses, metal manufacturing, battery suppliers, leather producers, and the list goes on, air conditioning manufacturers and digital specialists. The breadth of expertise and skills we have here locally on our doorstep in Scotland has been a bit of an eye-opener for me, to be honest. So without further ado, we hope you really enjoy this event. And before I hand over to Andy from CTM, I'm going to run very quickly as a reminder for those who've just joined of the housekeeping rules to keep us on track, because we've got quite a jam-packed agenda. So please turn off your video and mute your sound so there's no distraction for the speakers and no impact on the recording. Please use the chat facility. We'd really love to hear your questions, to post any questions that you might have, and we'll run the Q&A session after the speakers' presentations. And that's all from me just now, so I'll hand over to Andy from CTM. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's online webinar. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Andy Willits. I'm Sales Manager, and my colleague Luke Adams is Business Development Manager. I've worked in the rail sector for over 25 years, working at British Rail, Bound for BT, and various maintenance organisations within my career, which spans across signalling, infrastructure, and rolling stock. Myself and Luke both work for Soprasteria and are supporting the launch of the CTM platform, Competency Training Marketplace. The focus of today's webinar is to highlight and promote to the rail cluster members and the supply chain the key projects that are being introduced across Scotland's railway and what is required in terms of professional services and railway expertise. One particular area that this webinar will focus on and will be the importance of safety, training and compliance within the workplace in both rail and construction sectors, and the impact this can have on adding value to small and medium-sized enterprise organisations. As we all know, there is an increasing demand on the supply chain to make sure that what you offer in terms of services are carried out in a professional and conform to certain industry standards. We work in an industry such as rail that employs an array of skilled disciplines and an environment that is complex and relies heavily on safety, as the work we undertake on trackside and in depot environments carries a high degree of risk. Therefore, where we carry out certain tasks, we need to make sure that our businesses are managing all aspects of business assurance and that our dedicated workforce are working safely and that they have the up-to-date skills and qualifications necessary to carry out their daily activities. The rail sector as an industry is heavily focused on promoting safety, compliance and accreditation. One of the most effective ways of making sure the workforce conform to regulatory standards is by managing these elements via a digital, easy access online platform. This can help you modernise the competency management process and identify when accreditation is out of date, but also gives visual access to a training matrix and the ability to identify any skills gaps that you may have within your workforce. By having an overview of this data on a digital platform, it will add business value and demonstrate your commitment to training and competency. It will also reinforce your commitment when responding to future business development and bid tendering opportunities. Therefore, to address these requirements, IT and digital solutions provider Soprasteria has introduced a one-stop platform called CTM. My colleague Luke will today give you a brief overview, as shown and mentioned earlier on, about this platform. So I do hope that you can join us, as there will be opportunities to ask questions. In the meantime, we do hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and I would like to now pass you back to Shona, who will introduce our guest speakers for this afternoon. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. That was great. I'd now like to move on to Alex Hynes, Managing Director of Scotland's Railway. I'll just put your slides up, Alex, for you.
Thank you, Shona.
Sorry about that. That's it now.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, thank you, Shona. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. My name's Alex Hynes and I'm the Managing Director of Scotland's Railway, and I get to lead the teams at ScotRail and Network Rail here in Scotland. And I'm just going to take you through a few slides just to give you an introduction to some of the things we're dealing with, grappling with at the moment. But if I could summarise in a couple of phrases the twin challenges we're dealing with at the moment, that would be net cost and net zero. We have to get the net cost of the railway back to pre-pandemic levels as fast as we possibly can. And of course, we've got to tackle climate change, hence the importance of net zero. So those two things really dominating our agenda right now. Next slide, please. So in Scotland, we make up about 20% of the GB rail network. There are 7 cities in Scotland. We are recreating an intercity network for Scotland using these wonderful trains behind me. But of course, we also exist for freight. We operate the largest urban rail network anywhere in the country outside London, in Glasgow, Scotland's largest city. We're about a £1 billion a year business. We employ about 8,500 people directly, but the rail industry in Scotland employs in total 13,000 people in over 160 companies. So we're not just a railway, we're more than a railway. We're part of the fabric of Scottish life and its economy and its society. Next slide, please. So coronavirus changed everything, didn't it? We all remember where we were on the 23rd of March last year. I did, because it was my birthday and my dinner plans got cancelled, and we all watched the Prime Minister. And I think it's been amazing to see how everybody in the rail industry in Team Scotland has rallied around to continue running a safe and reliable railway for passengers and for freight. We have made it look easy, and I know it was not easy. So thank you to absolutely everyone on this call for everything you've done to help keep passengers and goods moving during the pandemic. At its the most strict period of restrictions, we were carrying just 10% of normal passengers, and no one is expecting us to go back to pre-pandemic levels of customers anytime soon. We're predicting maybe 85% of our peak demand might come back in the next couple of years, but I wouldn't bet on it. And we need to make sure that we don't just put back what was there before. A, we can't afford it, and secondly, we have a big opportunity to put something back which was genuinely better than what was there before. Next slide, please. So not only when the passengers disappear, of course, the importance of freight rose to the top of the agenda, because of course, you know, freight exists to keep supermarket shelves stocked and the lights on, and boy did we go shopping at the supermarkets. And so during the coronavirus pandemic, we've been operating more freight trains, longer freight trains, making sure that the shelves were stacked and the lights were on. And freight is already back at 100% of pre-pandemic demand, despite the fact the passenger railway is around 30% of pre-pandemic demand. So freight has done rather better than the passenger business in this post-COVID world. My expectation is that the railway we put back post-pandemic will probably be a bit smaller for passenger. And that's good for rail freight, because there'll be more space on the network for freight trains. And of course, if you go back to the decarbonisation challenge of net zero, which by the way is law, it's happening whether you like it or not, and whether you think UK government and the Scottish government can afford it or not, it's happening. It's legally binding. The UK was one of the first nations in the world to pass climate change legislation into law, and of course here in Scotland we always have to beat the English, so for Scotland it's 2045 rather than 2050. And of course coronavirus has also accelerated some trends we've seen around the death of the high street, internet shopping, and we're seeing strong market demand for high-speed parcels business, which of course the railway used to have. Everything in life is cyclical, isn't it? And we also continue to invest in the network, whether that was new stations or station redevelopments, helping to keep the supply chain fed, and the supply chain did an absolutely marvellous job. So thank you, and hopefully we did our bit by making sure we paid you swiftly to help your cash flow to keep you in business during this really difficult time. Next slide, please. So I believe that the railway needs to be and will be part of our sort of greener post-COVID recovery, but this is throwing down some big challenges for us, in particular around cost. So even though here in Scotland in recent years we've delivered every single project on time, on budget, or early and under budget, we are still regarded as being reassuringly expensive by the people who pay our bills. And the great thing about being a railway person in Scotland is Scottish Government wants to continue investing in the railway because they see the benefits it creates, whether that's decarbonisation or linking people to employment centres or affordable housing. Here in Scotland, we opened the first new railway in over 100 years into the borders, and railways are extraordinarily good at generating jobs and growth and changing people's lives for the better. And so we do have an opportunity to build on this favourable environment if we rise to the challenge which coronavirus has given us, which for me is primarily around cost. Next slide, please. One of the things that happened in July last year, so that was after lockdown 1, was Transport Scotland published its decarbonisation action plan. So not only has the Scottish Government committed to 2045 net zero for the country, it's also set itself the deadline to decarbonise the passenger railway in Scotland by 2035. And Scotland has a proud track record of electrifying railways. It's been electrifying railways since 1960, in fact. And in recent decades, well, since 2007, we've spent £8 billion on electrification, such that now 75% of passenger journeys are made on electric services for passenger, and 45% of freight in Scotland is already electric. But now we've got to continue to decarbonise, but we also need to create a much more attractive railway, because the clever people at the car manufacturers have just about worked out how to decarbonise cars. You make them electric, but no one's really worked out how we decarbonise HGVs yet. And so we're going to have to create a high capacity, high speed decarbonised railway for Scotland, for passenger and for freight, if we're going to hit those net zero commitments for 2045. And we rather like electrification. The science shows it's the most efficient way to decarbonise your railway. Yes, we will use battery and hydrogen on some bits of the network, but actually we will be electrifying the core routes of the network, a rolling programme of decarbonisation, and it's an absolutely massive opportunity for everyone on this call to get involved in that exciting task. Next slide, please. But we've got to deliver for our funders pre-election. This was the guy in charge. Hopefully we'll find out this week who is the Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero, Energy and Transport, which is a new portfolio which SNP have committed to in the first 100 days of their new government. And you know, there's only two sources of income from the railway. That's the passenger and the taxpayer, and the passengers are still working from home. So we have a massive affordability crisis. I've said that already. Our delivery track record on time and on budget is excellent here in Scotland, but we are regarded as being reassuringly expensive, whether that's the cost of projects or the cost and productivity of the people we employ. And we're going to have to tackle those issues if we're going to remain affordable and relevant in this post-coronavirus world. So my challenge to you would be, let's make sure we're all working together to try and meet those challenges. That does not mean ScotRail and Network Rail beating up its suppliers and trying to squeeze your margin from 3% to 2%. It's how can we work smarter together to deliver better outcomes for passengers and freight at lower cost. And we've got some great examples of that here in Scotland, where Transport Scotland, ScotRail and Network Rail Scotland work hand in glove. And we're driving alignment between track and train in the pursuit of efficiency, or whether that's the way we're working with Siemens, our signalling supplier here in Scotland, where we've got our framework supplier around the table helping us to build collaborative solutions rather than transactional procurement techniques of the past. So we have to meet these challenges, because that way Scottish Government will continue to want to invest in railways. If we don't, they won't. They'll spend it somewhere else. Buses, health, education. No one owes us a living. We've got to make sure we respond to the environment we now found ourselves in. Next slide, please. So innovation is going to be key, flexibility. Obviously, the supply chain has good visibility of the operations, maintenance and renewal spend for Network Rail, less so these days on enhancements because of the pipeline approach. But that doesn't mean you can't come and talk to us. We're committed to increasing the amount of spend on small and medium-sized enterprises, and we're on track to deliver those targets. And we need to learn from you as well. We don't know what we don't know. So if you're doing some fantastic stuff for clients south of the border or abroad, or you think there's a much better way of tackling a task, let us know. This is a two-way street. For me, relationships between suppliers and customers should be strategic partnerships. It shouldn't be a transactional, backward-looking relationship. It should be a strategic, forward-looking one. And that is one reason why our door is always open, and one of the many reasons why I'm here today. Next slide, please. So I look forward to your questions. Thank you for your time. I'll stop there because I know we're pushed for time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex. There's a lot, that was great, really interesting, and I hope people, just to remind people that have joined, to mute their mics and switch off their video, and also if you have any questions, please do post them in the chat facility. I'm going to move on to, I'll just stop sharing, and I'm going to move on to introduce Raj Sinha from SWGR. I'm just going to put your slides up for you, Raj.
Thank you. Right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to Scottish Engineering for giving us the opportunity to just share some of our experiences in respect of work winning from a safety, competence and training perspective. Just the next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Raj and I am the Managing Director of SWGR. SWGR has been in existence for the last 30 years, predominantly for the last 27 years in the railway industry. And our focus is in providing skilled and semi-skilled resources frontline into the railway industry. We are based in Scotland, but we do provide a service throughout the United Kingdom. Fundamentally, from a Network Rail Scotland perspective, we support Network Rail on possessions, on isolations, and from a frontline track perspective and safety critical resourcing, we support the Rail Systems Alliance, which is an amalgam of Babcock and Network Rail insofar as Scotland is concerned. We have our own in-house training facility, termed ScotTrain, where we effect circa 25 railway competency assessments and training modules. We have our own PPE business, which provides PPE to a significant quantum of first-tier organisations undertaking railway renewal and enhancement works throughout the UK. And we have a non-railway business, which is very much focused in supporting bridge works and examinations from a welding and quality procedure perspective. But we do work internationally as well, and we've just had some people come back from various works in Sweden as an example. Next slide, please. We have a relatively large facility in Scotland, and again, it's an open invitation to colleagues and friends in Scotland and south of the border that should you wish any support from a training perspective, a PPE perspective, or indeed to secure some facilities while you're trying to engage either directly with us or others, we're not precious, then these facilities are open for your engagement. Next slide, please. Our main DNA as far as safety is concerned is the concept of safe together. That's family, colleagues and friends, family being the railway family, colleagues being all our industry friends and colleagues, and indeed the supply chain and SMEs as well, from a safe together perspective. Our big focus over the last few years has been on digitalizing and innovating a lot of our communications, especially with our frontline colleagues. And I'll go on to explain a bit more of that very shortly. We've got a very robust training and competency program, and we're in the realms of taking on board what CTM have to offer, because that can be very quickly integrated into our digital footprint as well. We have a dedicated control centre that supports all our frontline engagement throughout the UK, and we've had a massive strong focus on trying to provide health and safety support to our frontline, especially for those that are working predominantly night shifts up and down the country. But more of that in a minute. Next slide, please. So to give you an example of one area that we have been quite innovative to Alex's challenge has been our WorkSafe app that we've developed. This allows us to ensure very intense communication with our frontline colleagues that are actually at the point that they're actually leaving the house to the point that they actually arrive onto a site. When they arrive on site, then we respectfully request them, indeed mandate them, to log into the app, and they will then be asked 4 simple safety questions. These are randomly generated, nobody knows. If they are not in a position to answer those questions correctly, our humble thought process is that they perhaps are somewhat, and their minds are elsewhere. They may be complacent, there might be some domestic issues. There's an alert immediately issued to our control centre, and our controllers will then contact our colleague who's not answered correctly, and will offer him or her the chance of answering another 4 questions. If they still are not in a position to answer correctly, we will look after the individual and we'll make sure that he or she gets home safely. But fundamentally, they will not be allowed to present themselves to the client. Now that can cause a lot of contingency issues, so we always have some additional resources that we have secured and that are available. That's not always possible. But that is something that is addressed through our risk review meetings, depending on the quantum of resource that is actually being utilised. All access from Network Rail alerts to other safety communications are within the app themselves, and indeed any close calls that need to be reported can be done so as well. And if there's any immediate notifications, be it an emergency, again, that's through the app or indeed through our control centre. On the right-hand side, you've got a photograph of what is one of our mobile health and safety wellbeing units. These are manned by part-time doctors and nurses who go out in the weekends and offer free health and safety wellbeing checks, be it glucose, blood pressure, cholesterol, and obviously a lot of support from a mental wellbeing perspective. Everything is confidential, and this is a facility that we are offering to all our clients, SMEs that are supporting us, and indeed our own colleagues as well. Reasonably innovative, we believe, but one that is definitively having a significant take-up both within our supply chain, our SMEs, and indeed our client body. Next slide, please. From a career development perspective, what we found is that there's a significant challenge in the industry. Because of the issues of the coronavirus, a lot of people are reflecting and obviously thinking about what they want to do in life. For some, home working is being very attractive, and for others, they've got significant lifestyle choices that have been inspired as a result of the issues in the last year. So we do believe that there will be a challenge in the industry when it comes to skills, training and development, and as a result, from a self-mode or self-help perspective, we're very focused on trying to ensure that we're multi-skilling as much of our colleagues, and that in itself is giving them the opportunity to actually develop their careers, but obviously in a structured format. So one of our experiences that I did want to share was that where it is safety critical possible, and it's not always, but what we found is that by multi-skilling, and again in a very structured program, there is significant efficiencies to be had and to be passed on to ultimately our clients. Again, another challenge that Alex was raising. Moving on, please. Again, from a digitalization perspective, I'll be the first one to admit that I was perhaps one of the last Neanderthals when it came to digitalization, but we've had to, personally, I've been on a journey to try and drive that through, and the opportunity was presented for us to actually really start pushing the boundaries on what is achievable from a digital and technology perspective. And obviously with CTM and the products that they're offering, we are very much on the realms of just about to sign up to that level of engagement, because it will support us in ensuring that we've got a very dynamic and intense level of management, both from a competency, training and development perspective as well. Moving on, please. Again, just a plea to all, we have won some reasonable contracts recently, and as much as it's a fantastic industry, it's one that you either love or loathe, but all those that are listening in, a humble request that if you've got any specific resources on the skill basis that we are providing to clients, we would be most obliged if you'd like to contact us, and we will be very happy to share with you the opportunities that we've got within our domain, and perhaps we can work together to rise to some of the challenges that Alex has already raised. Moving on, please. Well, thank you very much for your time and your engagement, and back to you, Shona.
Thanks very much, Raj. That was really interesting to hear what SWGR is focused on. We've got some questions in the chat facility, so if the speakers don't mind putting their cameras on and being ready in case there's one for them, I'll just run through them. Stephen Collicott says, I'm focused on the gaining, sharing of corporate and project knowledge and innovation training. What is the skills gap that is concerning you and that in your tenure you wish to be famous for solving? Stephen, don't know who would be best to answer that one. Anyone?
Please.
I think it was both. Alex, do you mind if I have a go first?
Both, yes, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So fundamentally, I think one of the challenges that we face is that as much as technology is being advanced, some of the marketplace within the railway industry remains relatively immature, especially at the level where we are working. You're right at the front line, and Network Rail is, doing a tremendous job without patronising in trying to really upskill and push forward the standards that are expected. But we've got a challenge on our hands now. The younger generation have got access to a lot of digital opportunities. And if we're going to give a career to individuals, I think it's really important that we need to try and make things even more simpler, if that is at all possible. Dare I say it, faster, and perhaps even more exciting. There are still some very, very simple concepts that I think could be taken on board that work in other sectors, but need to find a home in the railway industry. So forgive me if I've not fully answered the question, but my response is simpler and faster technology that makes life easier for those that are out there in all weathers, day in, day out.
Great stuff. Thank you, Raj. Would you like to add anything, Alex or Andy Willits? Or
I mean, in terms of skills gap, obviously our age profile is pretty poor. We've got lots of people leaving us in the next 10 years or so, and we've got to get the skills, knowledge and experience out of those people's heads into the minds of younger people. So we've got to do more on apprentices and grads, for example. But we've also got to do better about recruiting a workforce which reflects the country that we serve. So our workforce does not look like a typical Scottish street or, you know, the carriage of a train, and that's wrong. And it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed quickly. And apart from the legal, ethical and moral reasons for doing so, more diverse workforces are safer, more productive and more engaged. And we'd probably get more innovation if we had more diverse groups as part of our wonderful industry. You know, I suspect the vast majority of people on this call are white men. There's nothing wrong with white men, but we can do better.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add as well, if I may, I think from an industry that very much takes people from graduate level to senior management, and that's been happening since the days of British Rail. When I first joined from college, you were always encouraged to train, learn new skills, go on railway courses at the local training centre, somewhere in Crewe, which was generally where you were stuck for 3 weeks on end, learning all about infrastructure. But I think nowadays being able to identify skills gaps in your workforce is important to them, to keep them motivated, to give them a career path. And I think we work in a very diverse industry where technology plays a huge place in what we do. Going away from the old days of using drawing boards and getting rulers out, we use CAD systems now. We use much more intuitive systems such as BIM modelling for design. And I think whether you're from a civil contracting, signalling side, having that skills gap and being able to incentivise your workforce and encourage them to diversify their skills, I think that's important from a supply chain perspective, because the more you can offer and maintain a tier one contractor within the rail sector, the more choice there is, and innovation plays a huge part. So being able to identify that using a digital platform and having something at your fingertips is really valid, is really important.
great, thanks very much. I've got a question here for Alex. Do you have a regional quarterly supply chain meeting?
So personally, I meet 3 suppliers every quarter, because in my Network Rail role, I've been buddied up with Story, Babcock and SPL. But I know that Chris Kinnear, particularly in the capital delivery bit of Network Rail, has regular supplier meetings. And in fact, some people on this call probably were part of a national supplier conference that Network Rail held recently. And we're proposing to have our own here in Scotland towards the end of the year. So you are absolutely right to ask that question. I know Martin McLaren is on the call, as is Karen Powell, the head of procurement from ScotRail. I don't know whether they want to comment further, but for me, the key to unlocking this is for us to be having regular strategic conversations, not about, you know, last week's screw up on a contract. Do you know what I mean? And we've started doing that with some suppliers. So, for example, Campbell Braid from Siemens, who I think is also on the call, who works for Siemens, who are the signalling supplier, framework supplier in Scotland. He's now part of the capital delivery leadership team in Network Rail. And also with Siemens, we've started ScotRail, Network Rail, Transport Scotland and Siemens having discussions together about how we're going to decarbonise by 2035. And the question I would ask everyone on this call is, how much time are we having those conversations which are focused on 2035 and how we're going to work together to deliver it? Because I think there's sometimes, people think, oh, well, I'll wait for the tender to come out. Well, it's too late then, isn't it? Plus, you're probably bursting with bright ideas and we don't know what they are. So let's talk to each other. Talk is work.
Great, thank you. I've got two questions next that are relatively similar, so I'll join them together, I think. The first one is, is there an appetite for bringing private financing, oblique funding to the network in Scotland? And the second one, which is similar, asks, how does the uncertainty over passenger utilisation and future financing sit with the huge programme of investment required for net zero rail? Is it a case of wait and see, or does the programme plough on? I think in the questions they were put to you, Alex, but whoever would like to ask.
Do you want me to go first and then I'll go quickly?
Yeah,
I mean, the pressure to attract private finance is not the same north of the border as it is south, because public spending is a lot higher north of the border. And obviously we do privately finance some rail assets, rolling stock being the obvious example. But actually there's a chance that rolling stock might be publicly funded in the future, because of course Scotland is going to have its own national investment bank. So that pressure is less prevalent north of the border than south, because public spending is a lot higher in Scotland. And no, there's absolutely no wait and see in terms of passenger numbers. There's two ways to decarbonise a railway. Either you electrify it or you close it. And decarbonisation is law. We are on site electrifying East Kilbride and Barrhead as we speak. We're not waiting to see how passenger numbers between East Kilbride and Glasgow bounce back post-pandemic, because currently we're using trains on that route which in the future will be banned. We can't wait. We have to do it now.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Would Raj or Andrew like to add anything, or shall I move on?
I think my only point is that, again, multi-skilling will support. As the electrification programme comes online, we've all experienced the feast and famine engagement from the supply chain. And again, some people have gone on to other industries. The challenge for this generation is, how do we retain that skill base so that when there is the demand for greater works, and it's perhaps beginning to already prevail throughout the United Kingdom, then the supply chain's in a position to react. And I do think one of the low-hanging fruits is multi-skilling.
Great, thank you, Raj. I've got a question here asking about, will we see a prevalence in the use of frameworks in the procurement process going forward? Not sure who's best to answer that one.
So I think the answer has got to be yes. So if you want to drive a longer term relationship, if you want to drive strategic partnerships, you need to create an environment where that's possible. But interestingly, I remember before Siemens were selected as our signalling framework supplier here in Scotland, having a conversation with people at Siemens, and they were saying, well, if we get appointed to the framework, we can have these conversations. And it's like, well, that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, can't it? We should move away from the transactional approach. And, if you want to be part of Scotland's railway, let's have these conversations. before frameworks are put in place, for example. We've got to move away from the day-to-day if we're going to do something different. So here in Scotland, we've procured the Alstom wiring train and we've given it to SPL, who are our electrification framework contractor. But those frameworks end at some point. So where are all the other suppliers knocking down my door saying, how can we help you decarbonise the railway by 2035? They're not, by the way. And at one of the Rail North of the Border conferences we had pre-lockdown, lots of suppliers there were trying to sell hybrid trains. They weren't trying to sell me electrification. And that's a great example of people not reading the Scottish market properly.
I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to ask, I think I'm just going to manage one more question because we've got the demonstration to follow. Sort of linked, with the major challenge of hitting decarbonisation, capacity could be a real issue. Is there a group in place within Network Rail with a focus on ensuring the supply chain can cope over the years to come? That could be more for... Sorry, Raj, on you go.
Yeah, sorry, Shona, again, just my own experience as an organisation that supports Network Rail and first tier organisations is there is a significant quantum of engagement from various organisations. One that I would definitively mention is Babcock, are really driving hard to support and engage, and any information they have, they are sharing, and that is fundamentally being supported by the Babcock management, senior management, and indeed by Network Rail as well. So our experience is that there is a lot of visualization of information, and there are various forums, and as Alex has already cited, I know that Chris and company are clearly working hard to have all-encompassing Scotland conference as well.
Great, thanks so much. I think if we've missed out any of the questions, what we'll do is get answers to the people that have put them forward, but thank you so much to everybody who posted a question. This next part of the event is going to be a live demonstration from Competence Training Management that will be run by Luke Adams, Business Development Manager for CTM. So over to you, Luke, thank you.
Thanks, Shona. I'm just going to share my screen, so let me know when that comes through. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. So, yeah, I mean, it's already been highlighted by Andy at the start, and Raj, you talked about what you're doing with potentially looking at CTM to manage competencies and training. And really, I just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about what we're doing at CTM and at Sopra Steria to help the supply chain, to help all companies of all sizes better, more digitally manage their competencies, training, and really, help in all of this space. So what is it? And we've touched on it already, but CTM is really, on one side, a competency management system that people can sign up to manage their competencies and training, and we'll touch on some of them features at the bottom there. But as you can see down the bottom here, there's also another screen that looks very similar, and it's also a platform for training providers. So whether you're a company looking to in-house commercialize some of your courses, or whether you're a standalone training provider, Raj, like you mentioned with ScotTrain, this is also a platform for them to sign up to advertise their courses and hopefully benefit from some new business development and sales opportunities. Commercially, how the product is set up is that for employers looking to manage their competencies, there is zero charge at all to using our new digital platform. The only charge that takes place on the whole CTM platform is if a training provider was advertising their courses and they make a sale, we take a small transaction fee, very much like Amazon or eBay do. But for the actual supply chain looking to manage competencies, look at their skills gap, we are providing that free of charge to all employers across the UK because we see a much greater value in the data that the information provides. So I just wanted to run through a couple of things that is useful with CTM. One of which is, and the first thing that an employer would do is obviously look to manage their staff. They'd upload one staff member or 1,000, depending on the size of the organisation. And as we said before, we'll take Fred as an example here. we can actually tag Fred, against his name, his last name. We can assign Fred to a role, and I'll come back to the role in just a second. And we can put in other information about Fred, his office or project location. But really, this qualification section is really where we wanted to bring this competency management section to life. We could tag Fred against all of his competencies, and these aren't just Sentinel qualifications. These are all types of qualifications, whether they be Sentinel, Network Rail, whether it was internal competencies that you wanted to look at and address. The platform of CTM is catered to manage all of that in one place, not just your specific rail qualifications, but anything across Network Rail, construction as well. And what we're trying to do with CTM is really understand and help the process of managing competencies a lot quicker and easier and simpler. We've developed the training matrix, as you probably saw on the first page here, to really put this all into one place, where an employer can see all of their staff tagged against all of their qualifications, and then a smart kind of status expiry part over here, which allows, CTM will send you automatic notifications every Monday if something is due to expire in the next 3 months. So we're really trying to provide that proactive visibility to an employer, whether that's you're the director or a training manager, to really help understand competencies and qualifications. What we've done with CTM, as you probably saw at the start, there's a training provider side to this platform. So when you realise Joe Bloggs has got a PTS expiring, you've got that direct link to the marketplace. And that marketplace is where the training providers are putting on their courses. You can find the course that suits you in the date and location and time that's relevant for your employees, and you can make that direct inquiry to the training provider for that course. So we're really looking at bringing that ecosystem together, connecting both employer and training provider all under one roof. I said I'd come back to the roles, and I've only got a couple more minutes, but we'll show you some of the other functionality that you get as an employer on the platform, one of which is building out all of these roles that we just touched upon. So you could build out as many roles as you've got in your organization, and you could say, in order to be a track engineer, you need to have X amount of qualifications, whether these are external ones from Network Rail or Sentinel, or if they're internal qualifications or assessments, you could build that out as well. And the beauty of building out these role frameworks really helps frame you as a company, showing your investment in your people. And just to touch on the skills gap aspect, which was touched upon by Alex, and I think in a question from Stephen, we have a talent finder option here as well, which enables you to select any of the qualifications or any of the roles that you've made in your organization and identify the exact skills gaps that you have got in your organization. So you've got Fred, who is a track engineer, but he's actually missing one of the qualifications we say that he needs in order to be competent for his role. And we can bring up all of this skills gap across our organization to make sure we know exactly where we need to be investing our money, over what qualifications and which staff, in order to upskill or cross-skill people into certain roles. There's a ton of other functionality that I'm not going to touch on all today, Shona, but if anyone is interested in freely managing their competencies and qualifications, bringing that training provider and employer ecosystem together, as well as looking at all the other things you can do with projects and skills gaps, very happy to follow up offline afterwards to really show you the more detail of how it works. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now, Shona. But as I said, a free platform that we're trying to help connect employers and training providers together.
Great, thanks so much, Luke. That's us. We've actually been so efficient where we've got a few extra minutes. So I'm just going to conclude there and let everybody grab a cup of tea or an extra 5 minutes to their lunch. But before we go, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining, for everyone who joined the event today, and also to the great speakers, Alex, Raj and Andy and Luke from CTM. I did mention, I think, a few times we're recording the event, and you will get a link sent out to you. So that should be good if you want to catch up on bits you might have missed. And just as a small aside, the Real Cluster Builder will be announcing a second Skills Development Scotland event shortly, so look out for that. That's going to be an interactive workshop helping companies develop their people plans. So I think that should be a great event. Thanks so much to everybody once again, and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.